Yeah, I didn't do any like special sound drops or anything for this.
Yeah, this episode is coming in later than expected, and yes. I'm a lot less enthusiastic than I was when we announced it.
Well,
I've worn you down with my constant delays and cancellations. And
yeah. Well, it's I sometimes the pick doesn't go the way you think it's gonna go.
It's true, but it's just a bummer to like try this book club thing and really like have an aversion to this novel that we picked from an author that I've read before and genuinely really enjoyed too. So there was really no way of knowing, at least on my end.
Yes. So we should get into it. Hey, what's up? It's DeadEndRoad Show episode 88, I think, if I'm counting correctly, but I don't have any notes, so that is blind.
The number you put on the notes.
Okay, good. Then yeah.
Whether that's accurate or not, who's to say?
You know what? I'm gonna defer to the notes and say that is accurate.
I think so too, because you have a whole calendar system.
Yes. Have you opened the calendar
trust
yet?
No, not yet.
God damn it.
Not yet.
God damn it. But yes, we are doing the long-awaited book club episode for the Pallbearers Club by Paul Tremblay. And we had to delay a couple times, but it's fine because the book is finally read. It's done and dusted, and we're here to discuss it. It did not turn out the way that I was expecting it to turn out, mostly because I genuinely thought it was a horror novel, and it's kind of not. It sort of does something. It's tempting to do something similar to his other novel, A Head Full of Ghosts, which I like a whole lot better, where it's sort of dissecting horror tropes. In that case, like sort of like a possession story and sort of like a is this person possessed or not kind of thing, and sort of taking like a meta stance on that. It slowly gets there. It tries to do something similar with a vampire story, but it's quite meandering, I would say. And by the time it finally gets there, is just sort of like, okay, you know.
I do, because by the time it got there, I was checked out.
Yeah. But like towards the end, I was like sort of skimming, like the paragraphs start getting longer and longer. And it's even remarked upon that they're getting longer and longer.
Yes.
Because the way this novel is formatted is that it's we're told that it's the speaker's memoir, and then we have these interjections from a separate character who is marking up the manuscript. Yeah, so the supposed memoir.
Before we started recording, you were like, do we want to give a full summary? And I said no. But do we want to at least set up like the basics of what's happening with this book?
Sure. Yeah.
And by we, I mean you.
I knew that was coming. Yeah, so this is the story of Art Barbara, which is a hell of a name, but it's not his real name. It's the fake name that he's given himself for the story, but that he uses throughout. And it begins in high school as he starts the Pallbearers Club. And I think I gave this brief summary whenever we picked the book, and I had read the first couple chapters. And so the Pallbearers Club is this thing where you are volunteering at local funeral homes for homeless people and people that no longer have families, like elderly people, in order to so there's somebody there for their like remembrances, and then you help with their burial a little bit.
Can I cut in and say that as a concept and, the title of the book and where it starts, very intriguing, like really compelling. And unfortunately, this novel does very little with that. It moves away from it very quickly. And even when it is present, it just doesn't explore it in the ways that I thought it could.
It abandons it almost immediately.
Yeah. Very, very quickly.
Yeah. Which is weird because it is such an interesting setup, especially for a horror. Like there's so much you could do with a horror novel there, and it's not even like used as a sort of like horror commentary where this can be oh, isn't it kind of strange how this should be the setup for a horror novel kind of thing? Like, that isn't even the case. It's just sort of abandoned as we're taken on the rest of Art Barbara's life. And because at some point we get, I struggle to call it time skips because it's just him talking about his life, but you get his partial college experience, which was like nausea inducing. And then you get his adulthood experience, which loses me even more, as he's talking about all of the bands that he was in. And it, like, the way that I pulled out a section. Let me see if I can pull it up because I highlighted it in my Kindle, of just like the way that he talks. It really grinds on you, and it is obviously the point.
It wears you down, though, as the book goes along.
Yes.
To the point where the book's final chapter, the one with the greater and greater paragraph lengths. So I'll admit just right now, early on. So I read probably 2/3 of this book and was really struggling at that point. So I switched over to the audiobook version, and the audiobook. So the final chapter alone, which is just like you said, this meandering, overly sentimental mess, in my opinion, it's 2.5 hours long on the audiobook. Just quite a home stretch.
Yeah. It's a lot. Oh, this is like from his adult life section. Our jokey quid pro quo was tonally the same as it was in ye old days, but it felt different. With the stakes raised in part due to our adult status and shared admittedly bizarre history, there was an edge to our sang-froid. More than the one-upsmanship, more than the spelunking the verbal barbs for real and perceived slights, we raged an unconscious battle to frame everything that had been done and said all those years before. Like, it's just an obnoxious way to talk, and that is just the entirety of
it.
The book.
It truly is.
Well, I shouldn't say the entirety. Aside from the segments of the book that are being remarked upon by the other characters. But those
are so few and far between compared to those just stretches and stretches of like what you just read.
Right, because Mercy, or I guess Mary, is revealed towards the end, is a real name. She will just like make little quick like notes like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, kind of thing. But then she will have a big like summary of her thoughts on the chapter at the end of the chapter. So to get to that, you have to make it through the entirety of a chapter, and the chapters get longer and longer the further into the book.
And to clarify, this Mercy character is annotating the book throughout because she's come across Art's manuscripts before it's been published, and posthumously, posthumously rather. Or I guess that's a bit of a spoiler. You don't know that he's passed away until the end. Right. But yeah, like that is far and away the strength of the book, is her voice and her reaction and sort of the way that her perception of past events contradicts the narrator's, Art's own, and the fact that he is an unreliable narrator. And there are ways, especially early on, that like that dynamic really plays with storytelling, like ideas of storytelling and you know, memoir versus fiction, and you know, it's pretty cool, it's pretty clever, but at a certain point, I think even that there's diminishing returns in that, and this book just gets way too bogged down by the Art Barbara of it all. And
yes,
like I think we were talking about it, and because I was saying how I was not enjoying that character, that voice, the narrator, and you're like, yeah, he's a type, you know. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, like, because it gets to a point where Mercy, she is like, what are you even talking about at this point? This is not a memoir. This is a novel. And from that point on, every time that he mentions, like, says the word
she
memoir,
crosses it out and
she
puts
crosses
novel.
it out
Yeah.
and writes novel through the entire rest of the book.
Which even that, like, diminishing returns, like, I get it. Like, I was rolling my eyes at that because it happens so often. And there are, like, even stretches where, like, those are the only, like, even the interesting annotations kind of dry up because she kind of allows the text to just go on uninterrupted for a long time. In the service of, like, their long time friendship, relationship, dynamic, whatever you want to call it, because she's sort of getting wrapped up in his story. Like, that's part of it. That's sort of, like, the direction the the book goes with like the sentimentality and, you know, her caring about him and his health and what happens to him and all that. So
yeah, like it's trying to do like this whole, is it memoir, is it novel throughout the entire thing, right? Because you have these two contrasting voices where he in the text is insistent that this is how things happened as this narrator, and she is insistent that this is not how things happen, so you're writing a fiction. And the two like it don't really like stand on equal footing. You know what I mean?
I do. I think I do.
Like there's not really any doubt in the reader's head that these are like two like equally opposing viewpoints.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty clear that like this is fictional.
Yes. Yeah, the idea that Mercy could be this vampire and is like, you know, draining the life force over the decades of this guy, and he's experiencing these supernatural events and they all like come back to her in some way. It's sometimes like the supernatural events are framed in a way where it's like, oh, that's kind of towing the line, where it could have happened or it could have been something, you know, mundane or just in his head. But then at a certain point you're like, yeah, they're really, I don't think she's a vampire. I don't think any of this is actually real. I think it's pretty clear what the author is doing here. So that kind of takes any like tension away from, or you know, mystery out of it.
Yeah. And it gets to the point where both Art and then the author, like, so Paul Tremblay didn't really know how to end the book.
Oh, to say the least. My goodness.
Like, it was sort of like Art's talking like about his mom, and he's like, yeah, I could have just ended this here. Like, I'm talking to my mom about how I should end the memoir. And she's like, well, yeah, you're in the present, so it should be over.
Yeah. Which I actually like that. I like that idea.
And it's like, no.
If there weren't 3 hours left on my audiobook, I would have liked that idea.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, okay, no, but it's got to keep going. And then, but it's like, yeah, because you still haven't, like, there's nothing was resolved with Mercy. And it's like, but I don't know. Like, it's so strange. I guess it's in the service of mystery, but like, nothing about her personal life, Mercy's, was ever revealed. No. Ever.
Which is criminal because, like I was saying, like her voice in this book is the thing that's worth reading.
And what's even weirder is the fact that, like, they've been friends for, at this point, 30 plus years. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't use that fact that he knows nothing about her personal life, like anything about her family, where she works, where does her money come from, how she can keep buying cars and apartments, not like extravagantly, but like how she's surviving. He doesn't use any of that as evidence that she's a vampire.
That's very funny.
Like, what does she do day to day?
Right.
Like, and I don't know if that's, she was in college.
I don't know if that's a shortcoming on the author here, or whether it's something that just points to how self-involved the narrator is.
But then at the same time, like, Mercy also doesn't ever remark upon anything.
So then it's a failing of the author.
Like, the most we know about her personally, other than the way that she talks, is that she smokes weed.
Yeah.
Like, oh, and I get like some of the small details, like the home improvement shows, like whenever she's an adult, like just like little things like that. But anything about her personal life is not there. Mm-hmm. All to only slightly try to stack the deck and say, oh, well, maybe she's a vampire. That's it. But it's never actually remarked upon. But yeah, but anyway, yeah, like Art doesn't know how to end his book, and then the author doesn't know how to end the whole book.
Right.
And so then you bring back in the high school quote unquote bully, which I have issues with, because if you want him to be the high school bully, you need to have him do more than just like make a nickname for you.
Yeah.
Like, that's nothing. I was bullied worse than that. Like,
same.
And plus it's also a cool ass nickname. You're called the Undertaker?
Yeah. Yeah, that's, I mean, hey, I'd take it over some of the things I heard as a kid.
Especially if you were into heavy metal and then punk music.
Right.
That's cool as shit.
Yeah.
And this is like your 30-year-old grudge fueling nemesis. But like, I think it's part of a larger issue, and it's the fact that there was not that many characters in the book.
No, it was really just the one.
It was really just the one. You you see him just briefly mention other people he interacts with. He apparently had friends as an adult. I don't think there were any names.
There were names.
It's like that
there were names mentioned.
Were there?
Yes. I can't remember any of them because they hold no significance. But there were names. It's like the
Nathan Fielder. It's like hanging out with all my friends. They're just off screen.
Exactly.
You know? Like, yeah.
But surely there are good things. I'm just looking through. I'm just looking through maybe some stuff I highlighted from early on. Oh, here's something. Okay, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Like for me, a lot of it is like whenever that commentary between the main text and then the annotated text plays off of each other. That's what worked the best whenever it actually did work.
Yeah, I agree. And so, can I read something from the annotations that Mercy made? This is very early on. I think this is actually chapter 1, and it made me hopeful because I did tell you, I was like, well, I'm really enjoying this book, and I was a few chapters in. And so he starts off with his angsty, depressed teenager stuff. This is actually chapter 2, sorry. And so she's, sharing her opinion on it. And she says this. She says, this chapter is a little, quote, woe is me, don't you think? I'm not judging and I'm not belittling your school-aged experience nor your state of mental health. But by way of perspective, you have white cis male privilege, did not grow up in poverty, and you did not suffer tragedies during childhood, none that I'm aware of anyway. So it's like there is a level of self-awareness with this Art Barber character, as insufferable as he can be. There's this counterpoint that Mercy's making early on that I appreciated and I thought would go places. But then as the book drags along, it becomes more and more focused and obsessed with and even unfortunately sympathetic towards Art Barbara. And it just loses any of that potential friction or commentary or any of that.
It's weird because it's an attempt to lead the reader to the conclusion, as unsatisfying as that conclusion is. Like there's a I didn't mark it, but there's an annotation later on where Mercy mentions something about the press conference, and you're like, oh, what the hell is the press conference? There's got to be something that happens that would warrant a press conference. And then a few chapters later, or no, I guess that actually at the very conclusion of the book, we find out what that is. But nothing like that was ever brought up before. She's only ever remarking upon the text as it is, and not of any like extraneous events. But it was as if the annotations were made at drastically different time periods. But we know from the conclusion of the book that that's not the case. It's that they were made after he had died. So it's weird, right? It's almost as if like the earlier annotations were made acting as if he was still alive.
Yes, and that is to not give too much away to the reader, rather than actually have it feel like Mercy is writing this in a specific time and place instead of just sort of drifting through Art's life, right? Because like you said, Mercy is not... Like, I genuinely enjoyed reading her annotations. I think the character has a voice and a personality, but in terms of like a backstory and a life, she doesn't have one. Anything that she talks about is in service to where Art is at in his life in this, novel / memoir, which is
there was at one point where like we find out that she had been essentially stalking him. Like she knew where he worked.
All the bands he was in,
and would go to his gigs, but would never speak to him. And it's like, yeah, what do you actually have going on in your life? What do you do other than follow around your former, like, almost childhood friend?
Well, you could definitely say for sure childhood friend.
Well, she was in community college at the time. I don't know if that's like childhood. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's right. I guess I forgot about that. She was early 20s and he was a teenager. So yeah, there is a bit of an age difference. It doesn't turn into licorice pizza.
No, it does not. No, thankfully there is no sexual tension.
Yeah, that just would have been
too much.
Yes,
too much. It would have been like
this was already too much, but yeah, that would have definitely fallen into that category. Can I mention another? It's funny. I'm looking at my highlights, and most of them are from Mercy annotations early on. There's another one here where she starts to get like, the author is getting a bit meta in terms of like commentary about the structure of the book and writing and genre and all that. So let's see. So this is Mercy again. She says, in a memoir, the writer finds meaning in the meaningless, purpose within the inexplicable, unpredictable machinations of the universe, but suspension of disbelief as it pertains to the supernatural isn't something a memoir is built for. As a novel, this book can work maybe, and that's when she sort of goes on to the difference between what he's doing or trying to do and calling it a memoir versus a novel. But like these passages are interesting because it's like there's substance here. But then
those were notes straight from the actual editor. I swear to Christ.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
I swear to Christ.
Well, that's what I like about it, right? Because there was a self-awareness to it early on. And it was like playing with that. Because you have essentially three different voices working here. You have the author, you have Art's memoir, and you have Mercy. And the author was playing with those layers and actually making some commentary about it. But then, like we said earlier, it just devolves into, okay, she crosses out the word memoir every time it pops up. Like that's it. There's nothing else to it.
So here's a highlight that I made from later on, and I was like, well, where's her commentary on this piece of work? Because this is I won't detail the dreams I had that night. No one cares about dreams, but I'll say this: the dreams were wonderful and they were terrible, and the terrible parts were what was wonderful, and the wonderful parts were the terror. That's horrific. That's awful writing.
It's very bad.
It doesn't tell you anything. And so I'm like, okay, well, where's her part tearing this to shreds?
Right. We need the editor's notes.
Yeah, there's nothing. It's just left there.
And it's funny because in the context of this fake memoir, can Paul Tremblay excuse any of this? Is like, oh, I'm just writing this insufferable character, or does the blame fall on his writing?
That's the thing. Yeah, you can sort of shield yourself a little bit.
Yeah, you don't have to take accountability as much. And also that thing about dreams is bullshit because there were very, very lengthy passages about what very clearly were dreams, Art's dreams throughout the book. Yeah. So those were when it would devolve into these, what were supposed to be suspenseful, atmospheric horror moments that would bridge the gap between believable and supernatural. And for me, none of them really were effective. I wanted to just kind of get through them and move on. Which I think also points to the lack of mystery or true mystery, intriguing mystery as to who Mercy is and all this and what she is and, whether there's some larger, satisfying reveal coming or twist or I don't know. There was none of it. I mean, she has a different name. I guess she's what's the Mary thing? I was so checked out. I'm sorry by the time that came around.
Her real name is Mary, and the way that it's revealed is that whenever he's at the kitchen table talking to his mom, she says, what was the name of that friend you had, Mary or Mercy?
Yeah, it's seemingly a throwaway line until Mercy brings it up later.
Yeah, she's like, oh, that's a weird way for you to bring up my real name. Otherwise, nobody would have known.
Exactly.
There's another highlight I made from, again, later on. And I was like, so another thing that is he makes references to... not necessarily pop culture, but most of the time music shit, especially the music that he listens to, 80s punk bands. And most of it goes over my head because I don't know the actual specific members of these bands or the songs of the albums. But Mercy knows them, and so she'll remark upon them. But also whenever he does other either references a movie or something else, she will also comment on it. Basically to say I hope the reader doesn't miss this. Is the way I saw it. It was oh, you better get all these references I put in here. It just doesn't know what it wants to, to me, clearly, he had this idea for this character. Yeah. Right? But he didn't really have something that he wanted him to do.
And also, I don't quite understand how this is a worthwhile character to begin with. Maybe that's just my taste. Maybe that's not fair, but I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm struggling to be, because I also said I find the character quite obnoxious. But if you read the acknowledgements, he's like, yeah, I'm Art.
Oh, all right.
I'm Art Barbara.
Okay.
So it's like, okay, all right, yeah, like I get it. Like I had a feeling.
So this is a memoir then.
Yeah.
That's the twist.
Yeah, he's like, I am Art, but I'm also not Art, but yeah, I'm Art, kind of thing. So like he based the character off himself, like it's like, okay, yeah,
fair enough.
Yeah. But like, yeah, so like he had this character and he just didn't know what he wanted him to do. What I found really like groan inducing was the way that he brings back the Pallbearers Club.
Mm-hmm. As a band,
as his one-man band, again, towards the end of the book. And then shoehorns in him picking up a job driving a hearse, just to try to make it relevant. When it had been 30 years since he went to maybe like 4 funerals.
Oh, I thought you were going to say it had been 30 years since we started reading this book.
At that point, it felt like it.
But no, genuinely, this was like such a blip on the life. Like this club did not last long. It was like it was like a means to an end of getting these two characters to meet each other. It had no real purpose, which was so disappointing. It felt like false advertising. Yeah,
especially because the whole thing of Mercy joining the club was her purpose was to take pictures of dead people. And it's like, okay, that's fascinating. What's her angle there? But then like they stopped going to funerals. And so she doesn't do that anymore. So then what is she doing?
Isn't it crazy? So they stop going to funerals and then the book gets depressing.
Yes. Because we have to go through all of his health issues.
Oh, which by the way, yeah, I don't know if I've documented this on the show before, but I struggle with issues of the heart and not the like metaphorical kind. Well, okay, I should.
Well.
Yeah, okay, I caught myself there. But no, literally, like it's like a weird thing for me. So having to go through detailed descriptions of, was it Marfan syndrome and the possible and
aortic valves.
In fact, one of the things that he mentioned is something I actually have. It's one of those like benign heart things that's very common, but
the murmur?
Not the murmur, it's the mitral valve prolapse.
Oh, you got one of those?
I got one of those.
I got the murmur.
Okay, there we go. So we're covered. We're covered on both ends. Yeah, just like those passages were probably the closest thing to horror in my eyes because of just my specific issues. And I actually thought those were effective. I do like when an author will put something that is either personal or just like well researched into a character and sort of like explore that within like a horror story or something, just to like kind of add to things, but even then it really, I mean, it does go somewhere technically because of how Art passes away, but
again, it had not been an issue for decades at that point,
even though he was very bad about going to the doctor.
Yeah, and then just whenever it was convenient for the story, which I think Mercy remarks on.
Yeah, she does. She's like, if this was a real memoir, the timing of the heart attack that he suffers would have been like felt contrived and not believable. Sure, but you did it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like you can call yourself out on it, but just don't also just do it and commit.
Right,
I don't know.
Right. But yeah, like the health stuff did feel a little close to home, where he's talking about, because he has to have this spinal fusion surgery that I almost had.
Sorry, not to laugh, but
no, it's really funny. And he also has a heart murmur, which I have.
Yeah.
And he had like severe scoliosis. I did not have scoliosis, but the way my thing worked was that like doctors were always like, "Oh yeah, you don't have scoliosis," but I bet at school whenever they do the test, they probably always pull you aside and say that you have scoliosis, right? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, yeah, you don't have scoliosis, but your vertebrae at the top is fucking misaligned. So yeah, that was a little close to home. I'm like, oh yeah, I could have been this pathetic piece of shit if I had the surgery.
No, because his issues were not, well, he had physical health issues, but those were not the cause of his insufferable personality. True. So I think you're safe from that.
Yeah, it was just a lot. And then he, like he said, he's trying to tie the medical shit to horror. But for me, there was not enough.
And it doesn't, there wasn't enough there. And it also goes back to, we know Mercy's not a vampire. Like she's supposedly like draining his life force or something and causing all these health issues for him. But it's like, no, I never bought into that. I actually, I find real health issues and like more believable conditions like that to be more effective horror than any sort of like vampire angle, you know?
Yeah.
So in that sense, it did kind of work for me, but I don't think that's what the author intended.
The most tense part of the whole thing was whenever his mother was dying.
Sure, but even that felt like out of left field for me. Like, where was any of the mother throughout this whole thing?
Not the impact, but like the passages themselves where he's like kind of losing it and like barricading himself in his room.
Yeah.
As his mother is like coughing and dying away, was like there was tension there. But no, the same thing. The mother was never a character until she needed to die.
Which that's just like
it's
awful.
Very Disney. Because she was like, whenever he was a kid in those passages, she was just like a background. She was just his mom, you know? But then we only get like her whole background personality in the scene preceding her death, basically. And that's it. And then she dies. So it's like, okay, well, we don't have any attachment to her. He sure does, because it's his friggin' mom. But
that's the only purpose behind it, is to mess him up even more.
But for the reader, it doesn't do anything because we didn't know her. Like again, there was only two characters in this book, and really there was only one.
Yeah.
So
Mercy might as well have been like, the twist at the end might as well have been she was like a part of his like personality disorder or something, you know, which also would have been eye rolling, but I don't know, it would have been something.
I was waiting for something with the Mercy Mary thing, because Mary was the sister of the old vampire.
Yes.
But no, nothing.
I guess it's just a common name, you know?
Yeah. Like there was also a whole thing where he's also doing Lovecraft references. He keeps talking about the Shunned House, which is a Lovecraft short story, because this whole book is set in and around Providence, Massachusetts, or is it Rhode Island? Rhode Island. And Lovecraft has a short story called The Shunned House that is slightly based off of the whole thing, the vampire case, this whole Mercy Brown thing. That is sort of like the impetus for the vampire thing in the story. And so he's just like sort of making like all these allusions to sort of like New England horror, but that's kind of all it amounts to. Exactly.
I was going to say, so like early on when he and Mercy are going to the library and researching Mercy Brown for like, I think one of his like, projects for school, it's very intriguing. You know, it's cool. It feels like there's going to be like a through line somewhere, but there isn't. It's just kind of like, hey, look how interesting this historical, piece of history is.
Well, because the character himself telegraphed the whole thing by changing the name of his friend to Mercy.
Yes, that's true.
So it's like, oh, point. Okay, you're definitely saying that she's the vampire or reincarnation or whatever. And this is, again, what Mercy says in part of her, critiques. So so like a lot of things just like lose their impact.
And you could argue that the purpose of this book as a whole was more about the relationship between Art and Mercy. But even then, there's a lot left to be desired there. So like, you don't have to resolve mysteries. You don't have to come up with all these connections and like, you can leave threads hanging for me to be satisfied. Like if the main focus is, engaging enough, but even here, that wasn't the case. I just didn't have much to grasp onto by the end of it.
What even was their relationship? Like she saw them as like almost lifelong friends, and he thought that she was a life-sucking vampire that then gave him vampirism and killed his mom. But he was still buddy with her and was waiting for some kind of like duel to the death. I did like the weirdest passage for me was, well, the first one was the the apartment thing with the floating shit, that went on for way too long.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And it's that explains a lot there, because like a more effective version of that was there was a previous passage about just describing this interesting like piece of furniture that's like, I guess, like attached to the wall in a way that makes it look like the legs are like floating in the air. But like that stuff was mundane, right? And I think Mercy's annotations even say like he's finding horror in something that is just static and mundane, and just the way you describe it is what makes it effective. But then he turns it into an actual supernatural event where things get a little wild, the furniture in the room and all that, and it just loses me.
But it's again like everything, like putting the cart before the horse, because they go into the room and Mercy's like, hey, you see anything weird in my apartment?
Yes, exactly.
And he's like, no, everything's kind of normal. And then she's like, oh yeah, well, what about this dresser? And he's like, oh yeah, it's like, it looks like it's floating. He's like, yeah, it's bolted to the wall. So he knows ahead of time. And this is in his passage, by the way. So he wrote this. He knows that it's bolted to the wall. And then we get the floating shit.
Yeah, you're so right. This author is undercutting his own like tension and like at every turn.
Like if we knew after the fact that it's like, no, this was a weird thing that was bolted to the wall, then we can kind of see like, why the fuck is this dresser floating? It doesn't make sense. How does its physics work? You know? And then the explanation is as simple as it's bolted to the wall.
Like him losing his mind in the middle of the night and trying to take apart a dresser while also being quiet, not to wake Mercy up, was actually kind of like was pretty interesting and a little amusing and unsettling. But then, like you said, that precedes the attempt at supernatural horror, which just didn't work.
But then the other thing that was like, what was it? It was the I can't remember now. Oh, the scene where they've met up again. They're now middle-aged after his mother's died. And he's like, okay, this is it. I'm going to finally do it. I'm going to like kill her or something. And he takes her to the basement, and then he just hands back her camera. And he was expecting something to happen.
Licorice pizza.
Like what was he, what did he think was going to happen there? And then she just walks up the stairs. He's like, wait, I thought that we were going to like duel to the death. Like I didn't understand that sequence at all.
Yeah, I was just like, whatever. At that point, I was checked out. Some of these shortcomings, especially with the horror element, are interesting because this is an accomplished horror writer. Like there was a movie adaptation of one of his books that just came out this year.
I have really enjoyed the other two novels of his that I've read. I've talked about, Head Full of Ghosts. I've talked about I forget what the title is now since it's been turned into a damn movie.
The End of the World.
Yeah, The Cabin at the End of the World. The ending that he wrote is a lot better than the fucking Shyamalan ending. I don't know why that's surprising. It's a Shyamalan ending, but like, yeah. But yeah, this one was a miss.
Yeah.
It happens. I don't know if it is just a case of like maybe a little too personal, but I don't know.
Yeah, it makes sense when you mention the acknowledgements because it is very overly indulgent in Art Barbara in like every regard. So it kind of makes more sense that it was about him.
And sort of like this music scene and growing up in the late 80s and that kind of thing, and like references to all these bands and having a weird hatred for the Smashing Pumpkins for some reason. There's like 2 or 3 lines about not liking the Smashing Pumpkins. I don't know what that's about.
He also references Imagine Dragons.
Yes. Yeah.
For what that's worth.
Yeah. Yeah. There's lots of like musical.
I'm just not a big references person in fiction.
Yeah, because if the reader doesn't have context for it, it's just like, yeah, okay.
And how often is it truly adding to whatever story is being told, aside from, I guess, from like, period setting and all that?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. So like Head Full of Ghosts, his other novel, is a Bad Religion song. So like I get that reference.
Of course, yeah. No, you're right. And that's that is meaningful, right? Like I'd rather it be meaningful than just being like, hey, this was part of the period that we're in, and it was cool.
And so for this one, so they keep referencing like everything's Husker Du because that's his favorite band, right? And I don't know anything about Husker Du.
They could have been fictional for all I knew.
No, they're real.
Right.
Yeah, no, they're real. But I think like all the chapter titles are like references to their songs and shit.
It's such an obscure pick.
Yeah, I don't, you know.
I'm not gonna like fault him for that. But it's just interesting.
I just struggle with like early punk, like Ramones shit. It's so weird to like go from like Ramones, because that stuff sucks, to be honest. Like early punk is like unlistenable. And like to me, it doesn't actually even start to get good until late 80s, which is like his sort of time period. But he's kind of still listening to the older shit.
See, I would argue 90s.
Well, yeah, but like no, like so like late 80s, you do get like
you get like some Bad Religion,
Descendants.
Yeah. That's true. That's true.
But like a lot of it, like none of that is like here. So I just have no frame of reference. You know?
Yeah, because Art Barbara is, of course, one of those people whose music taste does not evolve with the times.
Right.
Just someone who's stuck in their ways, right. as we have seen for 300 pages.
Yeah, this is a bit of a miss.
Yeah, it's unfortunate as the inaugural book club pick here, because I just don't know where we go from here.
I was, just knowing this author and like briefly looking at the Amazon blurb, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, it's his new horror novel.
Yeah,
so like this would be great.
Yeah, it seems cool. I was very on board.
And it wasn't even a horror novel, really.
No, no.
That was like, to me, that's like the really unfortunate part. Like if it's a shitty horror novel, it's like fine, whatever. But for it to not even really.
I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that, because I have no issue. I think when we were doing the Halloween movies, not Halloween as in Michael Myers, but when we were like watching movies in the fall for the podcast,
yeah.
And I was like making selections, I think a handful of them honestly were like horror adjacent, because I value just a good piece of art rather than putting it in a specific genre. So if this was good and effective and horror adjacent, I would have been much happier. Like the fact that it was not a horror novel doesn't really bother me at all. Just the fact that it wasn't a good novel really is my issue.
Well, yeah. I'm just saying, like in the just like, yeah, we're going to read a horror novel, and it's not a horror novel. Just that on its face.
Yeah. I came to you a couple of weeks ago off air here. I was like, I know I just started this horror themed segment, book club, whatever you want to call it. Can we pivot? Can we pivot maybe to I guess broaden the scope, or include some different types of books potentially if we do continue on, because I know it's taken me like 2 months to read this thing,
because we've been really hitting the same kinds back to back.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, well, first of all, yeah, I'm fine with that. I don't care. It's fine.
Okay.
Well, it sounds good.
It's fine, like, because I think we never actually came up with a title.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, we have not came up with an actual segment name for this, so it's fine. I have not made sound or graphics packages for it, so it's fine.
Should we call it the Pallbearers Book Club?
You know what? I might have to look and see if it's this dude's fan club, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Because it sounds like it might be.
Then never mind. And also never mind just to begin with.
Just
because,
right. Yeah. Of course. But what was I going to say? Oh, so we started this, and then you were also kind of maybe looking into like joining a regular book club that's not just me. And so the solution for you might be, this is your favorite word, the metaverse. Because I saw this YouTube video where somebody was trying to figure out what the hell's going on with Facebook's or Meta's whole deal, and in their VR bullshit, somebody made like a book club in there.
Yeah, but like you could join a Zoom book club, and it's the same thing.
Yeah, and this one is also for senior citizens. And and I don't know how that works.
Well, I have the literary taste of an elderly woman, so it's fine.
Yeah,
honestly.
I don't know how that works with strapping like old people into a VR headset and then like giving them a game controller and then expecting them to talk about a book. I don't know what the order of operations there is. So, but yeah, I found that very interesting. There's just a book club in the hip happening place of the metaverse.
Yeah, I'm not at all surprised.
Think of our next pick. Did you have? I can't remember if you had one.
I did.
Or if we. Okay.
It's a matter of, are we doing this again? That's the main question.
Have an issue with doing it again.
So then let me announce our next pick.
Sure.
I would like us to read Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. Okay. It's a recent release. It's sort of this satirical take on the publishing industry, which I feel like is appropriate for us because we've had discussions about issues within the industry. You have, I mean, the show's namesake is based on your independent, book publishing project. So this just has had a lot of buzz around it, and I'm very excited to read it. It's sitting on my shelf as we speak, and I want to get into it. And I thought it would be a pretty good pick for us.
Good. Cool. All right. Cool. Well, we will start reading, and then
let's maybe not announce a date yet.
No. Try to work out a time at some point.
I swear, if it's a book that I'm engaged in, I can finish it much quicker than 2 months.
Of course.
It wasn't. I'm exaggerating. It was more of like, or has it been close to 2 months at this point? My goodness.
It had taken you a while to start it.
Yes.
And then it took a while once you got started.
That's true.
It's neither here nor there. It's
over
done.
now.
Yeah, it's over. The horror is finished. The evil is defeated. Yes. And I should probably just announce this for anybody that's made it all the way through. I will be going on, I hate using the word vacation as a freelancer, but yeah, that's what's happening. And so there's going to be a slight break in episodes for probably 2 or 3 weeks because I did not plan ahead again. So I apologize for that. I'm just looking at the calendar now. And
what's that?
So I know. So this will go out on the 9th of August, and then I will not be back until the 22nd. So then by the time we or me would be able to record would be that week. And so then there would not be something until the 30th. So it's about a 3-week gap. And I do apologize for that, but it is what it is. So I will try to plan ahead better, especially because I will also be traveling in September, so I might have to record like 3 episodes in one day or something. I don't know what I'll do, but yes, because I will be out of town again for like the 31st until the 14th.
So you can't do like a portable recording setup? That's not up to your standard? I would
sound a lot worse. Would be the issue.
Okay.
It's like I would just sound a lot worse.
I mean, how bad could it be though? Because like I'm plug and play here. I just got the mic and the laptop. I am not plug and play. Right. But you could be. I am not plug and play.
We will see. We will see. Yeah, we will see.
Can we record in the metaverse?
Maybe. We'll have to interview some senior citizens that are hanging out in Mark Zuckerberg's paradise. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for us. Thank you for listening. If you have any thoughts on the Pallbearers Club, because I know a lot of people are reading along with us, or any thoughts on a book we should check out, video at that.
Yeah, if someone writes in, it would make this feel more worth it to me. So
sure. That would be for any sort of aspect.
Yeah,
the whole operation. But yeah, check out the YouTube for clips, segment breakouts, full episodes, all that jazz. Check out the Facebook page because I hear it's going to be very active.
Well, yeah, so by the time this episode goes up, which is August 9th, you will have seen a Facebook post talking about how this episode's coming out.
Yeah. Yep.
In theory.
All right. Okay, sure.
I don't want to make any promises, retroactive promises.
God, sure. Yeah, that hasn't happened before.
Oh, I was going to mention, so if someone is here listening, because they're like, ooh, horror novels and horror in general, we're going to do the Halloween thing again, right? Movies? Sure. Because I feel like that was fun. And now I don't know when we'll start, because I think when we did it last time, we started super early, right? Like it was September and October. But we'll just have to see.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
Basically, each week, or I guess every other week now, with the schedule being what it is, we'll watch a horror film leading up to Halloween.
Yes. And some of those might be their standalone episodes, depending on how long we talk, which would do me a solid with the schedule, let me tell you. I think that's it. That's all the updates. I got nothing else.
Thanks for listening.
We will catch you in the next one.